When we think about property, we usually just think about, well, our stuff, right? My car, my house, my phone. But what if I told you that property isn't really about the things themselves? It's actually this incredible, invisible set of rules that governs like almost everything we do. It's the secret sauce that lets us cooperate and build and innovate. So yeah, let's dive right in.
First, let's just try a little thought experiment. I want you to imagine a world where there's no such thing as ownership. No mine, no yours. Just stuff that's there for the taking. What do you think that world would actually look like?
Well, it would almost certainly lead to what economists call the tragedy of the commons. Imagine a big, beautiful pasture that's open to every herder in the village. Your personal best move isn't to be careful, right? It's to get your animals to eat as much grass as they can, as fast as they can before the next person does. And the result? It's totally predictable. The pasture gets destroyed for everyone.
This tragedy is the whole reason we invented the idea of property in the first place. And to really get why, we've got to look at the game theory behind it. It's pretty fascinating.
Okay, so this table really lays out the whole dilemma. It's like a game of trust. If you both cooperate, graze your animals responsibly, you both do pretty well. You each get a payoff of 7. Awesome. But, and this is the big but, look at that temptation. If you decide to cheat or defect, while the other guy plays nice, you walk away with a huge payoff of 9. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. If you both decide to defect, you both end up with a pathetic 3. The pasture's wrecked, and you're both way worse off than if you just cooperated in the first place.
It really all boils down to trust, doesn't it? This little equation here shows you the tipping point. The only way cooperation makes rational sense is if you believe the probability, that's the P, of the other person cooperating is more than 75%. If it's even a little bit less than that, well, the smart move is to defect, and the pasture's toast.
And that is exactly why we invent property. It's the solution. Without it, we're all just stuck in a loop, fighting over what's already there instead of creating new value, farming. Property is our social contract. It's this brilliant system of rules that lets us switch our focus from defense to production, which ultimately makes everybody better off.
So, how does this social contract actually work? Well, the trick is to stop thinking about property as a physical thing. Instead, I want you to think of it as a bundle of rights.
This is the big mind shift right here. Property isn't the car. It's the legally enforced agreement you have with everybody else in the world about that car. It's a relationship between people, not a relationship between you and an object.
So what's in this so-called bundle? Well, it's basically 4 key rights. You get the right to possess something, the right to use it, the absolutely crucial right to exclude other people from using it, and finally, the right to sell it or give it away. That combination, right there, that's what makes the whole system go. Now, once you have these rights clearly defined, and everyone agrees on them, something kind of magical happens. People can solve their own problems and create value, often with nothing more than a simple conversation.
Let's take a look at a classic case. So, you've got a rancher whose cattle keep wandering over and munching on a farmer's crops. The law has to make a choice. It can either be an open-range rule, which means it's the farmer's job to build a fence, or a closed-range rule, which means the rancher has to keep his cattle in. So, which one is actually better?
Okay, let's just look at the raw numbers. Doing nothing costs $100 a year in damaged crops. Building a fence around the farm is only $50. Fencing the whole ranch costs $75. It's a no-brainer, right? The cheapest, most efficient solution is for the farmer to build the fence. But what if the law says the rancher is the one who's responsible?
This is where the magic happens. The rancher, who's on the hook for a $75 fence, can just walk over to the farmer and say, hey, look, the cheapest solution is your $50 fence. That saves us $25 compared to my fence. How about I pay you $62.50 to build it, you make a profit, I save money, and just like that, they both win.
And this idea, this is the absolute core of the super famous Coase Theorem. It's a game changer. It basically says that if people can bargain, just talk and make a deal without it costing them anything, they will always find the most efficient solution no matter what the law says to start with. The law just decides who's writing the check to whom. That's it.
But of course, there's a huge if baked into that theorem. In the real world, bargaining is almost never free. So what happens when those nice, simple handshake deals just aren't possible?
We slam right into something called transaction costs. These are all the gritty, real-world hassles of making a deal. You know, the cost of even finding the right person to talk to, the time and legal fees of hammering out an agreement, and then the cost of making sure they actually follow through.
And this is so important. If the cost of making the deal is actually higher than what you stand to save, the deal just isn't going to happen. Period. If it cost our rancher and farmer $35 in fees just to save $25, they're not going to do it. They'll get stuck with a less efficient outcome, and all of a sudden, that initial legal rule matters a whole lot.
So if bargaining fails, what are the courts supposed to do? Well, they've got two main tools in their toolbox. They can award damages, which is basically just money to pay for harm that's already happened, or they can issue an injunction, which is an order to stop the harm from happening again. One looks backward, the other looks forward.
Let's make it a little more complicated. Imagine an electric company whose pollution is hurting a nearby laundry. Now, if you look at the numbers, the cheapest, most efficient fix is for the laundry to install a simple filter. But the choice of legal remedy, damages, or an injunction completely changes the starting point for any negotiation. It sets the baseline, the threat value, of what happens if they don't make a deal. So which tool should a court use? Well, there's a really elegant rule of thumb. When transactions costs are low, like with our farmer and rancher, an injunction is best. You just say, rancher, you can't trespass, and it forces them to the bargaining table. But when transactions costs are super high, like a factory polluting a town with 10,000 residents, damages are way more efficient. You can't get 10,000 people to negotiate a deal, so the court just steps in and sets the price of the harm.
Look, this whole framework isn't just some dusty old theory. It's actually the exact set of tools we need to think about some of the biggest and most complicated questions we're facing right now. And that brings us to the future of property itself.
I mean, think about it. Who owns the airways that our phones rely on? Who owns a piece of code? Or a gene? What about your personal data online? Or a piece of art that was generated by an AI? Every single one of these is a brand new tragedy of the commons waiting to happen. And we are trying to figure out how to assign that bundle of rights for all of them, right now.
And that's because the rules of property aren't set in stone. They never have been. They're human invention, a technology we create and change to solve the problems of our time. The rules that made sense for farmland 200 years ago, they don't map perfectly onto digital information today. The system is always adapting. And that leaves us with one last massive question. As our technology creates entirely new worlds, virtual worlds, genetic worlds, who gets to decide what ownership even means there? Who's going to write the next chapter of this social contract? Honestly, that's a question we all need to be thinking about.